You sit here, please. Wherever you want to sit, take the next seat.
Hello, Marie-Claire.
So you're busy the other days, right? Yeah.
You have to switch it on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. All right.
They're ready to go. This one is working, yes. Is it?
Hello. All right. So we are going to start. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for all being here. So today we are here to discuss and share some stories together as a family, as we said in this morning with Miro. Thank you for hosting us in the Digital Innovation Pavilions as well.
You're very welcome.
So actually here we are to explore some new ideas about radical innovation, focusing on education, business and investments. And we have here today some very incredible panelists from different backgrounds that I will introduce briefly. So we do have Mr. Orkan, Senior Advisor to the High-Level Champion for COP29 on Business Engagements. We have Marie-Claire, the founder of the Youth Negotiators Academy, Yumna Youssef, Sustainable Finance Specialist, Dr. Wasim Dabouk, Marine and Maritime Policy Researcher in Southampton and UNFCCC Policy Negotiators on behalf of Lebanon, and Rash, our friend, CEO and founder of Green Earth Agro in Ghana. We have also Maria, who is the Executive Director of Climate Change AI, and Carl, who is the COO of Climate Cardinals, and Zainab, the Data and Strategy Consultant for Fortune 500. Yes, so thank you all for being here with us, and let's dive in. So first of all, I will start with our guest speaker, Mr. Orkan. So my question to you is, how can businesses help drive big changes for climate action?
Okay. Can you give it to me?
Yes. Thank you, Kenza. Thanks for inviting. It's always a pleasure to be here with my very young visionaries. So it's like a 7th day of a COP, right? So what I can see that all of us are, working on two fuels now: the drive on coffee and our motivation. The two fuels that we can all agree are sustainable, unlike the fossil fuels. So it's great to be here, and so coming back to a question regarding the whole seriousness now, regarding the question, I think businesses can can support businesses do the innovations. The leaders of innovations, they they help to tackle the climate change because always first to innovate. They invest their money, they invest their resources, and they have some, cash and the entrepreneurial spirit because we see in this like an opportunity. And this is very important to private sector to see the opportunity in the subject, the green agenda. Second is because, when I say businesses, I also mean the SMEs. And remember that SMEs are like 90% of the businesses around the world. They are like 50% of 50-60% of jobs around the world. So the ones who started, I have a special passion and sympathy for the ones who have SMEs because they're entrepreneurial. They were brave enough to start this journey. And another journey starts when SME is going to be, going green journey. It's like, trying to climb Mount Everest with flip-flops. And when you start this journey, on the way you feel that you start to identify very good opportunities during this journey. So that's why SME is one. That's why I wanted to just to mention SMEs. In the meantime, SMEs are on the front line of climate change. So that's why you need to bring businesses, especially SMEs, to innovate. To find the solution, to collaborate with other stakeholders. For me, private sector is the one, and especially the small businesses, that should lead the talk, but walk the talk with the government. So we shouldn't wait for governments to act. I was in the government for many years. I was advisor for business development, public-private partnership. But again, with all due respect to government, they act slowly. So when so when it's business, they are ready to jump in, they're ready to invest in money, they have a skin in the game. While governments, you need briefs, you need papers, all this kind of things. So that's why I'd like to say that, I'm very happy that your office here from all around the world. So this is probably the closing remarks. So it's that businesses are driven by profits, right? We know this expression. But the climate should are also driven by not profits but profits, right? The visionaries, and I'm very glad to see so many visionary prophets here at this panel and here in the audience. So welcome to Baku, and hope you enjoy your fruitful discussions.
Thank you. So for emphasizing the role of the private sector on driving the change for the climate solutions. And building on that, I will ask you now. Since you are a financial sustainability finance, so how can finance support the connection between businesses and local actions? Hello?
Yes, this is working. I'll use this. Thank you for the question. I think I'll split it into two parts. And speaking specifically about business, I'll focus on SMEs, and then local projects I'll talk about after. So starting off with a statistic, according to the OECD, a survey done by them of private and public lenders, it's now noted that 73% now provide green and sustainable finance to SMEs. And this is through different means. So for example, preferential loans, tax incentives, and new markets for low carbon products. However, on the downside, only around, I would say, maybe 2.8% of those SMEs have actually applied to access that 73% of funding. And there are several barriers that exist and that come with SMEs accessing finance. So firstly, there is a major data cap that continues to persist. The majority of SMEs are unable to meet the reporting requirements from the large institutions. They don't have the capacity. And the OECD research makes it clear that the lack of data is a challenge for around 80% of lenders offering this kind of finance. Secondly, there's no common approach to data requests, which makes it really difficult for SMEs having to keep tailoring their approach, trying to, it costs a lot of money to try and meet those requirements in the first place. Limited reporting capacity is a clear blocker. And SMEs with sustainability reports are 1.5 times more likely to secure funding. But these reports, without guidance or capacity building, it's a challenge for them. So I guess whilst the money does exist, the access is still very limited. The data challenges exist. This is just and then just very quickly on the local projects and financing those. Of course, as friend Orkan has just said, that private businesses are there to make money, and private sector funding is, of course, needed, requires return on investment, and that's like a key thing. So when private investors see how money is going to be generated, that's when they'll provide money, and this requires stable revenue streams to repay their investment. And where these don't exist, the project will need public financing to complement.
Thank you, Yumna, for highlighting the challenges when it comes to financing some projects as well. And jumping on that, I will reach out to Rash. Raj works on sustainable agriculture. So how do your agriculture projects help communities and the planet? When we talk about finance, we forget that the first target is the communities. Can you tell us more about it?
Thanks for inviting me. I'll give you the ground reality of what it happened. Yumna gave good statistics, right? I tell people, I'm an ex-banker from Luxembourg, living in Ghana. If I can't raise money, God forbid every small farmers to even try. I know all sustainability standards to be applied. Doesn't work. People sitting in Munich, Berlin, Rome, London make some standards. Standards, there is a rule. When in Rome, do as Romans do. You cannot have Europeans and American standards to be implied on the global south. That's one thing. Second thing is these statistics about the money being. So I know where to get the money. When I go and apply for a money, they would say that there is $10 million given. But if you split across multiple people, that is not even $50,000. You can't even buy a tractor. There's no point in, so there is so much money going on capacity building, but there is no money going to actually implement that. So it's like giving you a mobile phone, but not giving you data. What do you do with all the capacity which is built? It's like you teach someone how to sew a sweater, but you don't give them a sewing machine, and you don't give them. So that money which I think which has so been in the statistics that, okay, 10 million has gone, but it has gone, which has brought no result to it. That's my ground. So I have been doing, the funny thing, these guys, I met them in the youth pavilion. When I started my business, I was also in the youth category. Now I have passed the youth category. I started my business when I was 30. Now I'm almost coming closer to 40. But there are a lot of challenges. But it is possible to do, but that persistence has to be there. There will be all, like on the ground, people don't even know. If you work with the agriculture community, which you're talking about, they're not a very educated community. They don't know, as in money comes from one of the institutions, stays in the capital of the country. It is not trickling down to the community where it needs to trickle. So I would just say one thing, because there's a lot of people who want to speak, that there has to be innovation, but there has to be a lot of investment of time and money in getting the basics right. There is so much of, there are so many communities who do not have electricity and internet. What do you do with the innovation? First, we need to get infrastructure correct. What is needed in agriculture now is not satellites or drones or blockchain. What is needed actually is saplings, seeds, water, bulldozers, and there is no money. If you go, I have gone to, I give you one last, given that we are in the digital innovation. For a long time, I used to ask people that give me money for agriculture. No one was giving me money. Then I put a word blockchain, okay, I'm tracking it. People started giving me money, but it didn't help anything. What is needed on the ground is not blockchain, it's not AI, it's not machine learning. It's the money which is needed to bring water, the tractors, the bulldozers, the saplings, the seed, which is not there. That is where we need to build our ground so correct. We cannot build a 100-floor building with no basement. We are trying to do that. This is my third COP. I've been listening. Very little action. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj, for giving an overview on the grassroots. So the reality is something very challenging, but let's keep having hope, and maybe we can have your view about. So you are director of climate change AI. So do you think that AI can make climate solutions bigger and faster when it comes to this kind of struggle?
Yes, I would say yes, for sure. But there are a lot of myths that people believe that often the types of AI that people are most exposed to require a lot of data. They are very energy intensive, and there's definitely a place for those kinds of applications in some domains that are, getting a lot of great results. But at the same time, it's, AI is never a silver bullet. Like blockchain, it would never be a silver bullet to solve any of these problems. People need to look at what actually those machine learning techniques can help in accelerating part of that solution. And in terms of data processing, definitely there's a lot of benefits across domains, not just in agriculture, for instance, but also in transportation, power and energy systems, climate and health, biodiversity monitoring. There's just such a wide breadth of different applications that have different needs, and it won't be like a brute force approach, a one type of method that will solve, be the appropriate even for all of these kinds of domains, because the data is also not there, right? Like I said, we see a lot of machine learning applications working very well with data that is based on the internet, right? Like everything on the internet was made for that, to be designed to be automated and processed in a very standardized method. In these climate domains, for instance, the ones I just mentioned, like these communities are all siloed. They have their own standards, and the way that data has been designed for scientists to work in these areas has not been with machine learning in mind. So the gap there is very big, and it will take a long time for some of these state-of-the-art solutions to be even applicable, because they require a lot of data. So there are definitely methods that can be scaled much faster with a lot more impact in the meantime.
Thank you, Maria, for giving us hope, and maybe to see how we can connect. So you mentioned something important, that the data is not still here. So when you talk about the solutions, where data is not still here. So talking about data, so we have with us Zainab, which is a data strategist consultant. So building on what have been said about AI and all those challenges and finance as well. So how can data empower systemic change?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Zainab. I'm from Morocco, and I'm a data consultant. I work with the likes of PMG, Google, to help them consult on climate action and how can we accelerate climate action. My work touches upon, as you said, systemic change. And when you were talking, Rush, I loved your speech, honestly, and I was like, "Ooh, how are we going to talk after him? He was so good." I think what you touched upon is very good because you talked about systemic change coming like from bottom up approach. Because currently, whenever we talk about climate change, climate action, we talk from top down. How is the UN helping us do things? But we're not listening to the farmers, and the farmers have much more to say than the UN or anyone. I think they have because they have lived experiences. I think that no one can talk about a reality unless they've gone through it, unless they've had that experience. And whenever we talk about data, we imagine people who are behind computers collecting data, but we also forget that the farmer has data. I think no one can tell you more about when is the best time to get your crop than a farmer because they have data. They know more the planet than any scientist because they also have that connection. And I truly believe that today the data stewards are the people on the ground. They are the communities on the ground. They are the indigenous people who have that lived experience and who have a knowledge that none of us might not have because no matter how much you go, I was a bad student because I think that I hated school because we were always fed solutions and we talked about a lot of stuff, but we were never like on the ground. We never learned things by going to like I would rather someone take me to a lab and then show me how things happen than tell me about the theory of Pythagoras or something like that. And I think that systemic change comes, as I said, from bottom up. And it comes by talking and starting with indigenous people. And it comes by going to indigenous people, having them be the people who collect the data, having them tell us about what they've learned. I think that data today, we see it as some numbers when we talk about AI, ChatGPT, but the data are people. We are the data. We are all walking data sets. We all know more things than what's on the ground. And I think that we should start talking about data as a human from the human lens. And we should also start talking about things in the intersectionality of the grand scheme of things. Because now today we're talking about SMEs, we're talking about finance, we're talking about agriculture, and even in COP we have COP Youth Day, then we have Finance Day, and we're all working in silos. But today we need to start working together and really harness our collective unity and work as a whole, because that's how you achieve systemic change.
Thank you, Sina, for your inspirational speech. Talking that we are all as humans, data as well. So we always forget when we talk about the digital innovation, we forget about the human side of it. But first, as women, as human beings, as youth as well, we all have a big role to play on the ground. I'm talking about this, so I will jump to Carl. So, how can young voices actually shape the climate action and technology?
Thank you so much. I'm Carl from Climate Cardinals. We are one of the world's largest youth welfare organizations, seeking empowering youth through education and through language accessibility. One thing is that I think how youth can now shape climate action is on the first ground. I think what we've seen is public-private partnerships. I think a lot of youth and a lot of NGOs at COP haven't really, in the best way, I guess, engaged with private corporations. I think, of course, a lot of NGOs have, and rightfully so, are allowed to be skeptical towards the for-profit and the corporations. However, I think Climate Cardinals and a lot of people in our space has really tried to work with corporations to find meaningful partnerships. I think working with partners such as Climate Cardinals is working closely with Google. Google is powering our translations program with Google AI Cloud. So we've been very closely working with Google to develop our translations program. We're now working with Zoom, for instance, so that people in our chapters on the ground in the Global South can use Zoom platforms to have chapter meetings. They can have Zoom meetings and webinars to do fundraising. So I think what I see is that youth can, it's hard, of course, for youth to to steer climate action and climate policy through the normal channels, through voting. We can see that can also work, but I think mostly what we're trying to do is that working with corporates, leveraging our corporate network, if that is Zoom, Google, TikTok, really developing partnerships that can take our impact further. And I think I wish to see more NGOs perhaps engage with the private sector in meaningful ways. Of course, that means that corporations and for-profit partners has to actually come to the table in a way that doesn't just tokenize youth, but actually want to create a development and partnership with youth. But I think that for the next COP, I would love to see more cross private to public NGO collaboration, and that can happen in many ways, but I think also creating partnerships that are specific to your organization. So we do translation, Google does translation, it's a perfect kind of partnership.
Thank you, Carl. So talking about the role of young people, we can maybe jump into the technology and policy. And first, by talking about the negotiations. So Marie-Claire is working with many youth into capacity building to give them the tools to be negotiators. So Marie-Claire, so how can bring education and how can we bring education and investments in the forefront of negotiations?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And afterwards, I would love to hear from you, as actually he's one of our trained young people. This year, we trained over 300 negotiators for the UNFCCC process. Which I think is an investment in itself, right, to the process. And I think especially when we talk about human-centered investment, I mean, building the capacity and ensuring that young people are here in these processes, have a say at the table, have the access, but also have the knowledge, have the kind of like, you know, not only like just sitting there and just like kind of passively, but actually having the ability to actively participate. And like, I mean, you did like interventions like in the middle of the night. I mean, like having this dedication of young people, to me, is what we as young people should really do in this process as well. And with the engagement and with the ability of young people to really be on the forefront of these negotiations, also the climate justice elements, the investments, the access for young people to more funding will anyways come through, right? Because at least I'm like kind of like sick of having the same people doing the same stories again and kind of having performative language with the exclusion of young people to talk about young people as we are kind of just a mere like stakeholder group being on the side. But actually, I think it starts with engaging the young people directly. And there, of course, education and capacity building, very specific capacity building, is at the heart of it, right? And I think like having also young people coming into this process is not only great for the process here in Baku, next year in Brazil, or wherever we are going, but actually also for these young people to go back to their communities and talk, for example, like as you mentioned, talk with the communities about the importance of reforestation or agriculture practices. And I've kind of, that we have like a way more of an interchange and exchange between the different communities, because I think these conversations here are happening in a bubble, and many people outside who actually contribute to the innovation on the ground do not actually know what we are doing here, right? And I think young people are a beautiful bridge builder, agents of change to connect these goals. And that's why we also need to build the capacity and strengthen their involvement here, also through tools you have been mentioning, and also know like David and Fatin in the audience, we have been building together an AI assistant, because many young negotiators were struggling to find maybe the right references or like the right documents in the next, so you know you support it as well, in the negotiations directly. And that's why it's so important that how can we bring these innovations, which are already there, to the negotiation space to strengthen and support and assist the negotiators to make policies which then are actually like good for all of us, and that we have future-proof policies which lead to future-proof actions.
So thank you so much, Marie-Claire. And this is the direct actions that we can see and feel, and thanks to her, many young people are parts of the negotiations today, and we have an example with us here. So Wassim is negotiating on behalf of Lebanon. So Wassim, you are also in researcher in policies and everything. So how can global policies support those innovations that we've been talking about from the beginning?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and to listen to the previous interventions as well. I'm learning a lot just by listening to you. As you rightly pointed, I wear multiple hats actually. This is my first year negotiating on behalf of Lebanon, and I'm full of gratitude, honestly, for initiatives like the one that Marie-Claire has involved in, the Youth Negotiator Academy. But I'm also a researcher at the University of Southampton, and at the University of Southampton, I've been really pushing. I mean, very involved in the policy, academia to policy interchange, basically the interface between the two, and facilitating knowledge exchange. And I've been really interested. I think the issue is, I mean, like you said, there is innovation all around. You know, there's knowledge is available, and I think the trick that we miss, especially at universities, is that we often lock ourselves in our ivory towers. You know, the innovation is trapped there. The knowledge is there. It doesn't lead to actual implementation on the ground and innovation. And I think academics really usually struggle with identifying the demand, basically, about where can they use their knowledge, you know, and to partner with, I mean, I agree also with the guest speaker as well, in saying that it's usually very slow to work with governments usually, and that is a big frustration. So I think the solution to that is that we need to have multi-stakeholder partnerships involving industry and public bodies, and also communities, as was mentioned as well, and researchers. So in that respect, I've been really, I mean, what you've been doing, like on your the Youth Negotiator Academy, you've been basically training the trainer. Honestly, a lot of the knowledge that I'm gaining through my experience working as a negotiator and learning, I've been learning insights into the entry points where knowledge can be transferred and be used to develop those solutions for, I mean, to become really, really like solution-oriented and relevant to what is happening on the ground. And I think there's a lot of initiatives also globally that, I mean, I think the work of the non-state actors, the UN high-level champions team, you know, I'm aware of what they're doing as well. I have a colleague from the University of Cambridge who leads on that from the UK side. And they do a lot of work, especially in supporting young people, especially in, I mean, he caught up with me just because he knew that I wear both hats, and he wanted to touch base and know, I mean, how is it that we can support you and ensure that you and other young people from an academic perspective can come into these settings that are really, really difficult to navigate. And a lot of older people who have been in the academia for long, have made up their mind about it. They don't want to engage with it. So it's a time for us young people to really change the scene. I'm gonna stop there because Ken says
Thank you, Yassine. So actually, today we've learned that how businesses, finance, investment, technology, and also policies are all connected to drive the change. Thank you all for this. Now I want to open the floor. I know we have some very smart people here attending with us from the NFCCC and also entrepreneurs that we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or you want to share anything. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, thank you very much, all these speakers. It was an amazing lineup. All stars. You are all powerhouses in our own way. So my name is Alex Paris. I'm with the UNFCCC Secretariat. And my question is to Hush. We were discussing even before the panel. So I want to hear from you more on your experience in future project ideas for small islands and how sustainable agriculture can help in their development, but also in building resilience. So for example, specific crops that go well in different islands.
Me and Alex had a funny discussion about growing chilies in Maldives. So, see, every land has a different way of growing different things. For us to implement on the ground, I hear every time people focusing on policies, laws, everything, but there is not enough focus on implementing that policy. Once, imagine you have negotiated the policy. Are we making sure that the policy is on the ground where it needs to be? I think we need to kind of focus a bit more on implementation, because You said it right. On the ground, you don't need a rush to tell a person from Vanuatu or Fiji or Maldives what to do. What we need to do to increase, how do you say, resilience, is to empower. Without money, no one can do anything. It is what it is. You can, I can give you a Ferrari, but I don't put fuel inside. That Ferrari is even worse than a cycle, right? So what we need to really focus on is create a system where profit and change are intercombined. If you're just looking for change, forget it. It's not gonna happen. We need to make sure that, I do believe as human beings, few people are a little bit more equipped to make more money than other people, but we are not trying to make everyone Elon Musk, but we can at least have everyone having at least $20,000. It is possible, but we need to focus on implementation. There are great laws. Laws have never stopped someone from murdering, but making sure that the laws are implemented stops people from murdering. So this is my, I cannot change. We need to empower the locals. Locals have everything. We need to make sure the money goes where it needs to go. That's it.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting panel with diverse opinions. I just want to share one thing we have seen in India in the last 4-5 years, and then maybe I want to elicit a response or your thoughts. We saw the emergence of DPIs, digital public infrastructure, and what it did is it unlocked the innovation capability, which means there is not one guy solving, but multiple people solving for multiple problems. And just to give you one example, we had Uber in India, in the cities, and some of the tuk-tuk drivers, not the bigger cabs, but they had a problem giving 20% back to Uber. It's too much of, they don't get anything at the end after working 8 hours, 9 hours. So we had this open protocol for commerce called Beckon, which got live in India. And suddenly it grew faster than Uber without any advertisement. And we had more than, in one city, Bangalore, from where I am, we had more than 150,000 drivers come online, earn $50 million in 18 months. And Uber doesn't give data of drivers, but in this open platform, all the data is available, aggregated. And if I am a driver, I can separately take my data for the last 18 months and get a loan from a bank, because data helps the bank to assess if I can repay. And now some people are looking at financing electric tuk-tuks to those who are able to work harder and smarter. So, this apart from every actor doing their part, whether some kind of infrastructure has an important role to play, because we know in Africa now they are doing the open agri-net, and at Belém, where the next COP is, they're taking this idea where everybody can plug into the agri-net network, and people can trade directly without a guy in the middle. So just wanted your thoughts on.
You can take
Yeah, my question was about the issue of data. It was addressed mainly to the speaker that talked about appropriateness of data. And it was very interesting to me because as a background, I'm a data scientist, and always I try to, live into this dilemma of how can I help with data, really. And I concur with you that sometimes technology and technologists are affected by fashions, So there is the fashion of data, there's the fashion of blockchain, and so on. And my question is to you is that maybe is the problem not the data, not the technology, but probably the fashion that's around the technology, and maybe the way on how to find a good financeable project is to foster appropriate technologies and to find a middle between the not use and use of technology. Thank you.
It's a wonderful discussion following. So my question is mostly to Mary Claire, but to others a bit as well. My question is, since she has been doing work with Youth Negotiators Academy, and they're training the youth and teaching them negotiation, right? So my question is, since in global South and global North, those countries who are responsible for most of the pollutions are harming the countries in global North, global South, right? So it's more about if someone's act causing me a loss of $5, then that person is liable to give me back that $5 as a compensation, right? So alongside the negotiation, can we think of a system that is more about responsibility rather than negotiation and bargaining? Because if you are causing me harm, then you are responsible to give me the compensation, right? So rather than going for negotiation, or I would say alongside going for the negotiation, can we think of a system which is more about compensation and more responsible rather than being bargaining with other parties? Thanks.
We start with Raj, Maria, and then Marika.
I think both your questions have one thing you said about the agro network. Imagine my village does not have internet. What do I do with that network? Starlink is not allowed in Ghana. So these are the things. So we are jumping the gun to find solution. India is a good example because government gives money. Coming back to the same point, the farmers in India have subsidies, farmers in Europe have subsidies, farmers in America have subsidies. If tomorrow government removes that subsidy, the tuk-tuk driver will do nothing. India, even for 100 rupees, you can have data. If someone wants data in Ghana, he has to pay, he has to work the whole month to just use internet. So I don't think fashionable tech is a problem, because fashionable tech helped me get money, but my money is not enough. I use the word blockchain, I raised the money, I brought it down, but it's not on me to bring internet to the ground. So we should first concentrate, because people sitting here are not going farming, they're not going mining, they're not going fishing. Hungry people cannot solve climate problems. So it is bringing infrastructure. We build the first step. Everyone should at least have food, electricity, and shelter. If that is not done, we are enjoying our times in Baku.
Thank you. I'll probably address the first two questions as well. So the first one, in terms of digital public infrastructure or digital public goods, definitely is a space that helps catalyze ecosystems, no matter which ecosystem and area. And climate tech broadly, it's a place where it unlocks a lot of things. And in the machine learning community, as I was mentioning, my first intervention is something that the infrastructure, that is the data, that is the tools, that is the frameworks. It's not there yet in many cases, so it's definitely something that requires investment as well. I also agree that the development problem doesn't get solved with infrastructure, but I would argue as well that technology is a very big accelerator of development. So we also shouldn't overlook that, because governments will look at that to accelerate their development as well. But as technology is an accelerator of development, it can also be an accelerator of inequity. So governments should be also looking at that angle of the equation as well. To address the question about the trends, that's definitely something that I think the incentives are misplaced, so that people converge to the things that are shinier, that get more attention. But that's something that scientists sort of having a more grounded and sound approach. And in responsible AI, we look a lot at fitting the tool to finding the right tool to the problem rather than fitting tools to problems. So that is a lot of the educational and capacity building work that needs to be done there as well.
Good. And the third question. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's why we have the negotiations, right? I mean, the whole point is, for example, on the finance piece, but also the loss and damage is about who is paying whom for what, by when, under what conditions. And I mean, that's why we are negotiating, because we don't have a global consensus on who should pay what, who should, like, you can call it compensation, but the word under loss and damage was kind of like, I mean, there was a lot of debate on this. Countries wanted to have like called compensation, but then they kind of agreed to set up a fund under the with an agreement that it's not called compensation, because compensation has a legal terminology, which basically makes countries then also liable to actually pay it, and that's why we kind of do solidarity funds over the compensation. That's more on the technicality side. And yes, I mean, as we have the global goal with the Paris Agreement, we have been steadily moving more and more into implementation. That's also why I think it's so crucial that we're advancing also the decisions around the global stock take, and specifically take the recommendations of the global stock take now in the next cycle of the NDC. Because the NDC is exactly doing what you mentioned, right? It's bringing whatever is discussed all up here to the ground, to the people, to the country, and actually makes it legally binding through the legislation on the ground. For example, the constitution or whatever kind of the national jurisdiction calls for. So I mean, this process is super important. I think what is also really important that we as young people are engaged again in the NDC process, because otherwise, like, these things are happening, like, somewhere else in the ministries and becoming like, just paper after paper. So it's very important that we are right now engaged in these NDC processes around the world. Maybe just also to add, I think the other one has a lot of like accountability and also long-term perspective. And by having young people like Wazim and many others actually in these rooms as negotiators, I think the perspective is changing. Because by having young people who are living until the end of this century, actually changes the perception of someone who will just not physically be here anymore in the next 30, 40 years. And we have many, many, many beautiful, like wise elder senior negotiators, which is also really relevant for the process. But if we don't have an intergenerational approach, and if we don't bring the newer generations also to the tables, we are losing this long-term accountability. And I think that's just kind of like by having young people, a perspective change and a perspective shift is naturally coming, but it's not enough. And I think what is also really crucial, and again, bring it back to my first point, bring this intergenerational perspective to the NDCs, and it's also where we can really push and also hold our countries and our even local jurisdiction accountable to the actions. But yeah, great question. And I think Wasim wants to build up on this.
Not exactly on this, but I want to build up on the conversation for this. Thank you. I just want to say I'm also a lawyer by background. So and your point about the implementation of laws, and I think a big issue of implementing laws is when they are not fit for purpose. That's a really, really big problem. They're not relevant for what they were there for. And I think all the communities, especially end users, I really like the example from India because it involves the end users in shaping, the policies and how their future is going to be, And I have another example on that, actually from India, from on the fishing communities. I think I worked with a colleague of mine at the University of Southampton who developed an application for fishers to input their data on it while they go onto the sea and start fishing, and that involved them in the process of informing the legislative process to create the laws and then to build up on them with the policies that will end up that will affect the management of fishing resources that determines their livelihoods. So as small as they might feel that they are, they're playing a really important role in making sure that the laws and the policies that come after them are fit for purpose and serve their needs and respond to the challenges of climate change as well. So because fisheries are really affected by the effects of climate change, and it directly affects those people, and if they're not brought into the picture as end users, then it's really problematic. And this is where you have the issue of implementation. So they need to be brought from the very start of the problem as the ultimate end users.
Yes, I'm gonna build on what all of you touched upon. I think that something that you said is we want to give people a seat at the table. I would even push it further and say we want to get people to rebuild the table because the table does not look good right now. We need to rethink the systems that are existing. We need to challenge the existing structures and the status quo. And as you were talking about Wasim, not only having the farmers and the people who are on the front lines as an afterthought, but having them from the beginning of the conversation. Bring them in and ask them, do you actually think that this is going to work? Do you actually think that this is something that will be useful for you? And also, do you think that this is something that is not just flashy for us to say that we're all in Baku and we're all doing climate action, but in reality, we're all just here just for like having fun time. But in reality, are we actually making change on the ground, as you were saying? Are we including those indigenous communities and farmers, be it in every sector? Are we including young people? Are we doing youth washing and just bringing them in a sector? Or are we doing real work like what Claire is doing by getting them into the seats and doing capacity building? And to answer also your question about fashionable tech, I think that there's two folds to that answer. The first one being, yes, fashionable tech is something that is on like changing. Like a few years ago, someone talked to you about AI, you'd be like, no, and now everyone's suddenly an AI expert somehow. I think there's something there to also be done when it comes to use what's happening, use the trends to your leverage, like you were talking about. I love using blockchain and just patting it everywhere. If that gets you funding to help people on the ground, why not? I genuinely believe it's all a game, and you need to learn the rules of the game. As long as you learn the rules of the game, you can use it to create real change. As long as us as people who are in this battle and people who actually want to create change, we know how to create that change, we know what we want and what are the values. Why not use the game to our advantage? And why not get the funding by using terms like AI, climate change, data, blockchain to get funding to the ground and help the farmers? Because at the end of the day, all we want is to protect the planet. And if using those fashionable trends helps us do it, why not?
Thank you, Zineb. So, talking about... No, you can.
You can sit there.
You can sit.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I was just feeling to say a comment from my experience and perspective as well. Oh, thank you. My name is Camila Romero. I am from Chile, and I am a member of the International Indigenous Youth Forum on Climate Change. So I was really happy to listen from you, as I feel we have a lot in common, coming from grassroots, coming from very doing the work background, I think. And for us, I wanted to share this, like for indigenous peoples and for youth specifically. We have a lot yet barriers that we keep struggling in the UNFCCC system, and also even in our countries. But even that, indigenous peoples are coming more to participate actively in the discussions, and we should recognize as well all the efforts that we are doing and the youth are doing, the next generations coming here to share about the negative impacts from their territories and to propose actions and have a real proposals. So I'm really happy to listen and get the inspiration of youth that are doing really propositive actions. And yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, we're talking about also inclusion of indigenous peoples and indigenous youth at negotiations, and it's something that we will start hopefully to think more how to do it and concrete it. So how do you see this involvement of indigenous youth or indigenous peoples in the UNFCCC? Do you think that the system is prepared for this inclusion in the decision-making table? Thank you.
I just want to say something quickly. Actually, I remember in a previous COP, I was on negotiations, and one of the indigenous people, he came and he said, if we are not part of the table, we will be part of the menu. So either the system is prepared or not, we need to have representations from everyone. So I
can maybe start off and say, when you ask the question, is the system prepared? I don't think so. And I think the system is not prepared because the way how we are taking decisions, the whole process is very much centered around a Western way of decision making. And I do not have all the knowledge, but I would love to listen also to more to indigenous people on how decisions are taken. And I think there are many more ways on how we can actually take better decisions. Back when the COP presidency, the 23 presidency was hosted by Fiji, there was a beautiful way also Talanoa dialogue, which is from the indigenous communities in the Fiji Islands, which is very different, right? And actually, we had many. They were like all the heads of delegation and ministers were made to sit in a circle on the ground, and many of them were like, "Why do I sit on the ground?" You know, and like taking off my shoes and things like this, right? But there's so many ways on how we can take decisions, and we chose one, and we basically make everyone fit into this one way of how to take decisions. So I think first question, the system is not ready, and we need to get better and get more diverse in how we're taking decisions, and multiple processes we are allowing also to come in here, because we clearly see that the current way is not exactly working, right? So first we need to listen deeply to indigenous peoples, and I very much welcome also that you and others are taking the time to actually come to this process and sharing your very valuable time and the insight. So we need to listen. The second one, yes, we need to get more indigenous peoples into the delegations, because again, they are rightful citizens and also like owners of the territories, living in the territories. They're not owners, but I mean like living in these territories together with the territories. And all of this can also lead to a lot of tensions for many of the territories and the national governments. And I think that we also need to find a way on how indigenous peoples can nevertheless join, even for example, as I know many of them have tensions with the government, on how we can get them directly into the negotiation process. So very happy to also discuss this with you afterwards and bring in more indigenous people in general and specifically the young people.
I will give the floor to Rush, and I also want to hear from someone here with us who works with indigenous people, actually, David. So after Rush.
First of all, I think the good thing about this panel is we are all on the same page. I don't think that technology can be excluded or policy making can be excluded or finance can be excluded. I'm just giving you the ground reality. Everything should work in that. I live in a village which is around 120 kilometers from Accra. Accra is the capital. Indigenous people are there. They have never been to Accra. I would encourage you to do a poll in UNFFC. Ask people not about anything, but do they actually even know what is United Nations? You will have an astonishing answer. People don't know, and believe me, Ghana is a country where Kofi Annan comes from. If you go to that country and ask that, do you know what United Nations is? Forget about UNFCCC. Ask them, you know what United Nations is? They don't know. So the time we can, currently the education level is not there. They don't know what climate change is. They don't even know what temperature is. We are far from coming to all these discussions. The systematic change is really needed. I believe in the current scenario, there's a lot of education missing where we are in really indigenous communities. From my experiences says that there are few people who get educated from the indigenous community. They go to the city center and then they realize, but that indigenous person who's moved from their indigenous city to the capital is not necessarily bringing back the information there. So there has to be, however the political system is, let's say in Ghana there is democracy, the elected representative of that should represent the voice. There is a systemic change on ground which is way more important at this moment than all of this. This is my ground feedback.
Thank you. And let's hear from how AI and blockchain can also have a huge impact on the communities on the ground. So,
Actually, I really wanted to say something different first. So I'm David Dahl. I run a nonprofit called Gainforce that works with indigenous people in Brazil. We recently Peaks Prize on our inclusive approach on technology development. Thank you. I think I absolutely agree with what Marie-Claire has said, that this whole negotiation process comes from a very Western-centric approach, and even worse than that. If we talk about global North and global South, this is a narrative that has been given to us by the global North, right? The global South people, what does it even mean? Is Australia global South geographically? It doesn't make any sense, but like that perspective and narrative of people who are poor, people who don't have opportunities, people who are asking for resources, I think it's a story told by the global North to weaken our narrative and negotiation positions. I personally prefer to use global majority because I believe we need a reframing of who we are. Because we are 85% of the population, the fastest growing market in the world, and also the youngest population in the world. We are the opportunity of the future. So the global majority term, I think we need to make sure that we take our own storytelling in our hands. Indigenous people need to be at the table. People from Africa, from South America, from Southeast Asia, they need to be at the table because we cannot afford other people telling our story like from their perspectives, right? And so I think if we think about global majority instead of global South, then radical innovation for climate action becomes very easy. Because innovation doesn't mean for the global North, it means for the global majority. It means how can we decentralize innovation to South America, to Africa? How can we empower young people to have their own tech business? How can we remove Google and not have it in the US, but like create Googles all around the world in the global majority? And I think this is really, really important to rethink, reframe this, because we don't have a lot of time left. So yeah, that's what I wanted to just
add. Last comment and we will take questions.
I just wanted to, I'm experiencing exactly what has been said now. For the first time, I'm experiencing in the negotiation rooms, and I'm facing a lot of obstacles. And I just want to say, I really want to thank you, Marie-Claire, and Youth Negotiator Academy, because as much as we want to change the game, we need to know how to play it first so that we can get inside and then try to change it. And people like Marie-Claire and the work that she does is really allowing us to come to that level, because we don't have the capacity. A lot of us suffer with the capacity and the know-how and then knowing the intricacies of the whole system. You know, it's complex for a purpose as well. And there are people who are trying to help us unpack it. And this is honestly just thank you. Thank you.
So it was really, really inspiring to hear from all of you from different perspectives and backgrounds. So the key takeaway I would say is that collaboration is really at the heart of this systemic change. By empowering communities, by rethinking the policy, and also how to use the digital innovation in a good way for the good impact, and also the finance. Also to go to those projects and help those communities who are suffering, who are in the front line of climate change impact. So thank you everyone for being here, and let's take a picture together. And this is just the beginning of the conversation. I think we need to keep on talking, discussing and collaborating, and please take it as a networking opportunity to discuss and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Also, can we thank Kenza for doing such an amazing job? She brought together such a diverse panel with people from all backgrounds, so big ups to Kenza.
Yeah. And thank you from Miro as well.
Oh, you're welcome.
Wow, man. Use global majority.